The views and opinions expressed do not necessarily represent those of Access Fort Wayne, the Allen County Public Library, or any other supporting group. Access Fort Wayne is a department of the Allen County Public Library. If you or anyone you know might be interested in making a television show, please call 260-421-1250.
Hi, welcome to the Cashman Mind, Body, Spirit Show. I think you're going to find the show today very interesting because it's about what's going on around us at this time. We're very concerned, of course, with a viral infection, but I'm going to relate it to you how the virus is a sugar eater. Yes, and we need to take advantage of that. And it has not been mentioned enough, I think, by the government or the CDC or NIH or maybe Fauci or the president. And I'm going to teach you the science of that today, and I think you'll find it very interesting. The viruses are not a living thing. Google it if you don't believe me. Just put in Warburg effect and viruses, and it'll explain the whole thing, what it's all about. Yeah, a virus is really a non-living entity. It has no way of making its own energy. Bacteria that live in your gut, they make their own energy. They have a metabolic system. But a virus has to enter an animal cell or human cell, steal sugar and fat, some proteins, and some genes to promulgate itself, to form a capsule around it from the fatty acids. And we could take advantage of that. If we don't feed sugar to the virus, it wouldn't live. And I have a number of excellent books here. The first one that I like to point out to you was written by Deborah Birx, B-I-R-X. You'll see her book right here called The Silent Invasion. She, as you may recognize her actually, as she stood there with Fauci and the president, the pretty lady. And she wrote this great book. And what I really liked about it, after reading the whole thing probably twice, I'm convinced she's extremely honest, because she admits her own faults. We all got some faults. And she clearly admits them. I could have, if I had pushed the situation more, maybe things would have been different, for example. It's right in her book. So let's speak about viruses in history a little bit. You know, we've had many pandemics, which is the world, epidemics in the country, going back centuries, decades. Who knows how long they've really been here, but we start recording them and writing down about them, you know, in the 500s, 700s years. The Black Plague, the epidemics. It's all summarized in this excellent book, Epidemics and Society. If you want to read more about them, I can't review the whole thing for you, although I have some quotes from here. It's an excellent summary of the world. Viruses are extremely small. They are much smaller than bacteria. You can't see them through a regular microscope. You've got to go to an electron microscope. Although there are a few that are a little bit bigger, and scientists took advantage of that and studied their gene structure, for example, and so we gained some knowledge. And now they really have the knowledge down in great detail and fantastic detail. But then again, the viruses again are spread around the world, and we like to prevent them. And another great book that I recommend called The Deadliest Enemy by Michael Osterholm, PhD, Our War Against Killer Germs. That includes bacteria too and funguses, and an excellent summary. In the U.S., 1 million or so have died from the virus, although around 12 million were infected. So around 10% or so. But of the ones that didn't die, the other 10, 11 million or so, many of them, though, are disabled. They have chronic problems with their lungs, with their kidneys, with their brain, their memory, with their bladder. So it's not just live or die. They associate with disability, so we like to avoid them. We like to protect you against the next pandemic and epidemic, and that's what this show is all about. It's extremely complex, but you will know a lot more than before the show started. Okay? And incidentally, I'm 39 for the 46th time. I had all my vaccinations. I totally believe in vaccinations. I had 4 shots now, no side effects from the shots, and I was not infected. Neither is no one else in my family infected. And maybe because I got vaccinated, they didn't get infected. If you're not vaccinated, you can have it silently. And that's what Dr. Deborah Birx says in her book. Remember, it says the silent invasion. You can have the virus, have no symptoms whatsoever. Mm-hmm. And that's the major mistake she mentions. She thinks this country and the world made in testing people just when they have symptoms. What she is saying is we should be testing people without symptoms to catch the true spread early, and we can do something about it. Wear masks, distance yourself, stay at home, quarantine for 14 days. A number of recommendations. So part of the problem with this virus has been politics get involved. And in every country, it's not just in the U.S., but in her book, she describes in great detail about 5 or 6 times a friend of hers who was working in the White House called Dr. Birx to see if she wouldn't join the virus team at the White House. She herself is extremely qualified. She worked especially with the AIDS epidemic and other epidemics in Africa. Mm-hmm. She helped track them, she helped trace them, she helped prevent them, she helped treat them. She went all over the world. She had tremendous amount of knowledge. Matter of fact, she had the data, she feels is very important about how many infections there are in each county in the United States. She knew that, and she had tried to tell that information to the White House task force, but frankly, they fought her every day. There was a man named Scott Atlas there. He no longer works there. He was thrown out of the White House at the end of Trump's term because he was passing out false knowledge. But let's look at our political system. An election was coming up, and when people are fearful, they're less likely to vote for you. And in Canada, for example, there was there was some increase in viral infection, but not as big as you thought. And the economy went in the tanks for a few months till the truth came out. So you can understand the White House being fearful, but then again, not acting on information, which the White House was not doing. They were not telling us where or when to wear masks. For example, they were not telling us the true infection rate. The White House thought, matter of fact, there were going to be 26,000 deaths. That was their prediction. They didn't worry about it. We don't need to really shut down the economy. And the NIH, the CDC, HHS, all these organizations were slow in their response. So the politicians got involved, and that killed a lot of us. It killed a lot of people in the world, and it will in the future. And I'm going to make some suggestions how we could change things, okay? What she has in here really is her story of providing all this information, what was going on in the world and the country, and the White House not responded to it because they were worried about the economy. Okay, they think of Canada, so you can't say that wasn't the reason, but people dying is kind of more important than maybe than the economy, but that could be debated. Okay, so interesting too is we were, we had the flu every year, and we get a shot. I get a shot at a certain age. You don't need more shots. My life irrelevant. I don't know, but maybe I don't need it. Okay, but I did get my flu shots. We have about 30 to 35,000 deaths from the flu, a virus, every year. But yet, from what I now know, is that the people who have, for example, a lot of sugar in their blood. Remember, the virus is a sugar feeder. It enters the cell to steal the sugar to live. Suppose we educated the public more about that, and maybe we could decrease the death rate from the flu virus. You never hear it talked about it at all. Public health isn't pointing it out. Just we're going to have a certain number of deaths from the flu virus, but they don't mention that the virus is a sugar feeder. I notice Republican Party, Democratic Party, even Dr. Fauci doesn't bring it up. I know they're sincere people. Matter of fact, Dr. Birx says nice things about him, and you watch him, and certainly, but I think he should be telling us that the virus is much more likely to kill people who have these diseases that have a lot of sugar in them, which is diabetes, especially type 2 diabetes. In New York, when they analyzed in autopsies, 90 to 95% of the people that died in New York were diabetic. It's a way across the world. Something you may not know is that China has the most diabetics in the world. Our fast food restaurants invaded the country, and that's what caused a lot of that. Although, it's more than that. It's not proportion-wise. You have so many people. China is the same. We're number 3 in the world. And anyone who is a bit overweight, has a pot belly, probably is diabetic. They may have not been properly tested. Remember, we already spoke about testing for the virus and the asymptomatic, but I'm telling you, also test to see if the sugar is elevated, and a fasting blood sugar is not enough. You need to get serum insulins. They are elevated 10, 15 years before the blood sugar goes up. So you should be testing for serum insulin in children. And if you read Dr. Kraft's book, Joseph Kraft, Chicago, he's died now at age 95 or so. He wrote a very easy book to read. You can see him on YouTube. Also, and you know what he says? I'll be looking down upon you before you might consider changing. And there are certain ethnic and racial groups where, and that's scientifically proven, where only 40% of the people are vaccinated against the viruses. 40%. Mm-hmm. And of that 40%, probably 80% are diabetic. So they're much more likely to die from this. I don't think they know that. They need to be told that. I give talks in churches on that, actually. And I'm on YouTube and Facebook, spreading the word and writing books. Matter of fact, I went to play pickleball today at Wildwood, and a lady came up to me, a great athlete, but she said she'd seen my videos on TV and I had recommended the keto way of eating, and her and her husband, would you believe this, get rid of their diabetes. And they're playing pickleball. What do you think? They're probably both going to live to be 100. It kind of made my day, to say the least, but that's why I do these things. So Dr. Birx also discusses that patients, many of them are not symptomatic, and we're not testing them, so the spread may be extensive in a community. And she would say, for example, that if you think 20,000 invaded this city or this country, probably it's 200,000. She multiplies it by 5 or 10, so we have a silent invasion. But then again, the president said to her, well, all you're doing is revealing you're increasing the number of people that we know about, and it could interfere with my re-election. She put it in her book. Yeah, interesting. Okay, and some of the spread is asymptomatic, slightly symptomatic, very symptomatic. The only way to tell for sure is to test them. There are two ways for testing them. You can get the nucleic acid test and a PCR test. One tests the surface of the molecule, and the other one is more specific, looking at the nucleus. One, you can get the results immediately. The other one, it takes a few days. The one you can get the results immediately is probably the best one, because people like to know the result right away instead of waiting a few days and the information gets lost in the mail or something. So we spent our time concentrating on developing the vaccine, and we did it quickly, but still it took some time. It took a year to 18 months or so. That's fine, but we should have been testing, because the spread was occurring while we are developing the vaccine. Do you think industry might have something to do with it? Do you think the drug companies, pharmaceutical companies might have something to do with that too? I mean, who knows? There's money to be made here, okay? And so we need to test people very early is very important. And we should have looked at the previous epidemic. We had plenty of warnings. There have been major commissions, especially G.W. Bush. He outlined very specific things we should be doing and recommending to the World Health Organization. We don't fund with enough money. And when the virus, and China didn't exactly tell us, it's possible there's a virus escaped our area. And what's interesting is that the previous epidemic with the coronavirus was the SARS epidemic in 2003, and the same darn thing happened in China. So they hid that fact for a while, but fortunately we were able to contain that one a lot better. But we learned things there we should have applied to this epidemic and coming epidemic. It's guaranteed you will see epidemics in the future, pandemics in the future too. I mean, obviously, we need to be prepared. So to how fast should we wear a mask? How fast should we test? And maybe if we develop a proper way of eating, which I teach, we wouldn't provide sugar in our cells for the virus to invade, for it to steal for energy, to steal fatty acids, which come from sugar, to make it capsules on itself so it can multiply and then destroy and escape the cell and spread across the world or your body and kill people in the process. So And we could have been doing a lot more research since we knew about the previous virus. And the George W. Bush really was pretty darn good at promoting the study of it. And Dr. Burke also liked Dr. Redfield, and that they were doing the best that they can. But she really thought the NIH, the CDC, the HSS, these people were much too slow, did not develop a plan, didn't really understand viruses, and that can be repaired. We can look back, let's peek back, but let's break out and change and be ready for the next one, okay? Because prevention is a big thing. And for example, Dr. Birx had worked with Dr. Fauci. She had worked with Dr. Redfield, and also with a Dr. Gallen, who is one who discovered the HIV virus. And that, because we change our behavior, HIV problem is less of a problem. It's still a problem, definitely, but it's less of a problem because we're giving out information, and we have medications that we have. So we can prevent, but to totally eliminate viruses like Bill Gates thinks, who we could say nothing but nice things about Bill Gates, who wrote a number of books, but he wrote one, How to Prevent the Next Epidemic. It's an excellent book, excellent book. And he's written one before on the environment too. And I've read all those, and you can say yes, thank you, Bill Gates, because he put his money where his mouth is, or the vice versa, however you want to say it. About 20% of the money it takes to run the World Health Organization is from the Bill Gates Foundation, Melinda Gates, both of them on their foundation. So we have to give him a lot of credit. The only thing that I've read that book a couple of times too, but I will admit he never brings up what energizes the virus, because to me we could be getting rid of the viruses and type 2 diabetes and the 30 odd diseases that run with it: dementia, hypertension, thyroid disease, gum disease, heart attacks, strokes, amputations, dislocations, skin disease. I can go on and on. Most of dementia is from diabetes. I can show you the science. What we think is Alzheimer's disease is actually a diet disease 80% of the time. 80% of breast cancer is due to eating too much sugar. Yeah. But does the association in town that has an annual dinner, who sends all the money to Indianapolis for genetic research, when genes cost maybe less than 10% of it? What do you think? It's foreign money. We should keep it here. I've even been and talked to them about it. But it's the world. You keep on pushing away. The type 2 diabetes, with all the sugar in the cells, which you can get rid of type 2 diabetes probably in 3-4 weeks. Mark Hyman published many books. He would actually say in a week or two. I've done it with patients. And we can avoid all those 30 diseases and deaths from the virus. You see, why am I so passionate about this? Because there are many more deaths from diabetes and his 30 diseases than the virus. We're only attacking the virus, and not very effectively, because we're not taking its food away. I'll tell you a little side story. And this one is hard to fathom. A number of years ago, about when Trump was elected, it was just at that time, I went to the Indiana State Public Health Office in Indianapolis. had gone there because I had attended a diabetes conference, and the lady gave a talk who was head of type 2 diabetes, Indiana Health. Not the head person, but it was a lady. And who incidentally had worked for Eli Lilly, okay? And they make insulin used for diabetes, okay? And she was giving a lecture. She said, it's not stoppable, preventable, reversible. What am I to do? I'm sitting there, and I know it is. I stood up, and me right in the middle of a lecture. That was not particularly appreciated, but I got to think, that wasn't very nice, Rudy, but people dying is important. Whether I'm nice or not, I think is irrelevant. The information is important. I'm about information, okay? So I asked if I could make an appointment to see the head of public health, Dr. Jeremy Adams. She said, that's not possible. Well, I called down there, called his office, and he did invite me to come down a month later. And I'm there, and at that meeting, the lady had stood up in her lecture, wasn't there, but two other head of departments, head of aging, head of chronic illness, they were there. Two very nice ladies, and I had laid out there probably maybe 30 books on a big long table about my diabetes story and the diseases and the proof. It's not just about me, and the proof, and he had pictures of him and Trump laying on the floor, which I think were going to be in the wall. So you know about the time I was there, and he then. So I gave him these books. If you read them and call me, and I'll come back and see if he agrees. You don't have to agree with me, but at least I'd like to open the discussion because I'm trying to help people. And it turns out he was appointed to be the Surgeon General of the United States. What an opportunity. I thought, you know, if he reads these books, maybe he'll call me. Give me a car and a chauffeur, and I'll go around the whole country and tell the story to them to help turn this around. We'd have saved viral deaths, diabetic deaths, many more diabetic deaths than their diseases. But that didn't happen. I didn't think that happened, but I just mentioned that, a little bit of little humor here. But turns out, right on TV, I'm watching TV one day, he admits he's a diabetic. He didn't look like, I mean, you can't tell visually. You got to get a blood test. Even if you're thin, get a serum insulin. You might have diabetes. 20-30% of thin people are diabetic, especially children, and it catches them on the path. If you test them at age 30 or 40, well, your blood sugar is elevated. You've had diabetes 20 years, and your organs are already reflecting it. You just don't have any symptoms, especially renal disease, arterial disease. You may have no symptoms whatsoever, but it's already your arteries and organs are already being painted with diabetes. Yeah, and then he mentions, which is kind of sad too, that his wife had breast cancer. That's what on TV. I assume it's the truth, but it's going to hurt. And what's particularly concerning, which is right in this book, a number of times, that Dr. Jeremy Adams told people not to wear masks. Mm-hmm. That's right in the book. About 2 or 3 weeks later, he changes his mind, okay? But he did say it, and the trouble is a lot of the public heard that, and they didn't trust the government anymore, which was a problem. A lot of people didn't get the message. Maybe that's why when I go shopping and get my newspapers at a big grocery store, half the people wear masks and half don't. It was more important a few months ago, but the virus is still here. You know what I heard the other day, read in the paper the other day, is hard to believe. 75% of our children have had the viral infection. Most had no symptoms, but certainly if they had it, they could have spread it throughout the whole family and the family through the neighborhood. Interesting. So testing, you know, it is very important. Then we had travel restrictions, but we were always a little bit late. Dr. Birx is talking about, And she liked the model really from Italy. Italy does very, very strict testing. Every little town, every little county, they have testers on their computer. And she had reckoned the White House followed the Italian information, which was readily available to us, but they refused. So we're always a few weeks or a month or two behind, and many people, frankly, died because of that. Okay? Then came along we're talking about early 2020, okay? And then a Japanese tourist cruise ship called the Diamond Princess, they found some people had the virus, and they did some testing. A number didn't have it, and what happened? They took the cruise ship and totally closed it off. Nobody could go on. Nobody could go off. Well, it's like a petri dish. Then you can study the princess and find out how quickly does it spread. And people had a quarantine for 2 weeks to get off the ship and run a test on it. But the White House, Dr. Birx said, didn't pay enough attention to that because some people had gotten off the ship before they realized there were people with the virus, that they would have realized that person had no symptoms, but that person spread quite a bit when they got off the ship before that time. So it's difficult to prevent viruses, but you need information out there, the quickest information testing. She really stresses that, and to keep track of it, information technology, and maybe mask wearing, and not to get on TV and said, "Oh, don't wear a mask," like Dr. Adams did. Mm-hmm. And another thing that she mentioned, they kept on insisting at the White House, including Dr. Adams, that when the vaccine finally was available around December, is that they give it to the health personnel first. Well, but she wondered if Dr. Adams didn't say that because he's a healthcare provider himself, and that's the environment he's used to working in, when in reality, 70% of the deaths were in the 65-year-old people laying in nursing homes and rehab centers. They had a really high death rate, and they at least should have been vaccinated first, and maybe the rest of the elderly population, and then the healthcare providers. There was a big argument about that. And I'm not making any judgment there, but you can see the point. When 70% of the deaths occur in those people, that maybe they should be first in line for the vaccine. But we have to congratulate the healthcare providers for staying on the job and doing their job, because every day they're at risk. Every day they're at a high risk. And Dr. Birx had worked in Africa for an organization called PEPFAR Africa. In every kind of epidemic she was extremely experienced individual. And I think I'd paid some attention to her, and she was constantly being refuted by Scott Atlas in the White House, she would give them information, and he would pass out false information. And they met a number of times per week. The National Institute of Health, well-known government organization, we pay them a lot of money looking after health, but they were slow. They really didn't do their job very well, she says. Their focus was on vaccine industry, maybe, not testing. A mistake. Testing should have been number one. And of course, vaccine is important. So there was limited action there, maybe a bit of overthinking. And on February the 8th, 2020, Dr. Tony Fauci said, the risk is low. So I think you think twice about that. And we don't, we're not thinking, I'm sure he was sincere. But our thinking on viruses, pandemics, epidemics needs to change. And that's why Bill Gates is recommending this international, like the World Health Organization, except this will be a separate thing, with some advanced knowledge. And he's get the point, but again, he does not bring up what does the virus live on. That might be an excellent way to cut down infections, deaths. At the same time, you're reducing the death rate from the flu, and you're reducing the death rate from diabetics and the chronic diseases, which are a lot more common than virus deaths. It could work together. It could work together with the same method, telling people how to eat better, exercise more, reduce their stress. It could all be done at the same time. And we already spoke about the nucleic acid and the PCR test. One's faster than the other. And there needs to be some coordination between industry and government. Government didn't want to work with industry on this. Well, we'll develop the vaccine, but industry can do it a lot quicker. There needs to be coordination between them. And so I think we should be testing people for the flu. Yes, 35,000 deaths. We act like that's okay. No, it's not okay. Because most of the people that are dying with the flu are the ones who have chronic diseases which are preventable by teaching people how to prevent, stop, reverse type 2 diabetes and its heart disease, strokes. All these people have inflamed arteries. When the insulin level is up, which it is when the sugar level is up, your body is inflamed, you're much more likely to get infected with anything that comes along. A lot of our masks and PPEs, gowns and gloves and things that we were making in this country, like 3M was doing, and 3M said we were shipping them to China. We weren't even keeping them here for the people to use them because we didn't recommend them. Isn't that interesting? Eventually we did. And our P95 masks made in this country, which is the best mask to wear, 95% of those went to construction workers. They're exposed to chemicals, and you see them on scaffolding, they got masks on. And we weren't even giving to people with the viruses. Yeah, so our ability to manufacture needs to be improved. Another mistake Dr. Burke mentioned is that the CDC really had no historical memory of the 19 Spanish flu. They call it Spanish, but it occurred a lot, frankly, in the United States. It killed many people. There were armies traveling around, and they spread it to each other. Many more people died from the flu than the war. Mm-hmm. Interesting. And she frankly admits she should have stressed that more and could have pushed testing, data, wearing of masks herself in the White House to have been more pushy about it. So like I said, I respect her honesty, but it's a brutal book. It really points out the mistakes that were made. And she said she didn't seem to see a red flag, a flag that said, you gotta do something, okay? Well, if you look at the history and especially her experience with epidemics, maybe the red flag was there, it just wasn't noticed, okay? Johns Hopkins, excellent university, was doing a better job of tracking the illness across the world than the CDC. It's right in her book. Maybe lack of will was the root cause. lack of concern, a lot of reality, not understanding the history of viruses. I think if you're working in this field and to look at this epidemics in society, this book I have here, if I was working the field of immunity and epidemics, I think I would read that at least once a year, or underline it and read a chapter before I go to bed, because that reminds you, when's the next one going to hit? Next week? Next year? In 3 years? I don't know, but it's going to happen. And let's be ready. Okay? But some people have biases too, which is a problem at the government level. Like the flu, it's nothing, 35,000 deaths. Well, I don't agree with that. I think a lot of that could be prevented by proper education, by encouraging people to get rid of their diabetes, because they're much more likely to die from the flu. No one ever talks about that, but I did today. And you might say the city says, well, we don't have enough money. Well, I had to tell you, they have been fully funded since 2009. Okay, and as mentioned, Trump and Dr. Birx, there was conflict going on. Scott Atlas in there is in great detail in this book. So there is an interface here between economics. I wish there wasn't any strong statistics, frankly, that said if we take precautions and shut down traveling and stuff, the economy is going to collapse. There were no statistics to prove it, when there were plenty of statistics behind explaining what the flu would do to you. Mm-hmm. And that's pointed out. And we mentioned already what's called, and I'll speak about it again a little bit, the Warburg effect. What's Warburg? Warburg, Otto Warburg, was a German scientist. You wouldn't believe it. 1920s, and he discovered, and he worked on the physics and biology of cellular metabolism. I mean, you talk about a genius. His best friends was Einstein, for example, and that he survived all that. He lived till 1970, and he was born 1892, I think. Something like that is a miracle, because he was from a Jewish family, but he survived all that thing. Thanks for that. And the Warburg effect is what he discovered is aerobic and anaerobic metabolism, how we get energy. And he discovered that fast-growing cancer cells, it takes 13 molecules of sugar to make 1 ATP. So it takes a lot of sugar to make cancer cells multiply. Then they come to find out the virus is the same effect. The virus have the Warburg effect. So remember, I already mentioned that the virus needs to enter the cell, steal the sugar, the fatty acids, to multiply, steal some genes, gets covering out of that, reproduces out of that, all because the sugar, fatty acids, which come from sugar, steals some of the genetic structure. It's undergoing the Warburg effect there. So to teach the world what the correct food is would save a lot of lives. Get rid of the diabetes, deaths from the virus would go down. And so immunization is important, like I mentioned. I had my four shots, but why are some people not vaccinated? That's the reason I think what Gates is proposing, a world organization to control the viruses. And I think it's great. He's putting his money into it. I think that's fantastic. But when you got a significant number of people in certain countries, I mean, some people, because of religion, don't get vaccinated. Mm-hmm. there are groups of people who don't get vaccinated because of their religion. I don't know, it's because they think they will live forever or whatever the reason. But why don't people get vaccinated? Some, it's religion, okay? Some even think that Bill Gates put a chip in the vaccine. They don't get it because of that. Well, he did invent Microsoft, but obviously a ridiculous idea. Unclear message from the president, the government. Dr. Adams saying you don't need a mask. Unclear messaging confuses people. But again, I like to emphasize, get vaccinated, because you're top of a pyramid. You don't get vaccinated, then if you got it and have no symptoms, which is quite possible, it's improbable, you spread it to other family members. You may kill your father or mother or children, or the children can kill you, pass it to another family. It's like a pyramid. You're constantly multiplying the people. You can affect a whole town. Yeah, get vaccinated, and we will always have the non-vaxxers, and they are a danger to all of us. We've all been near them. Probably didn't know we were near them, but if you're not vaccinated, you could have the virus. You could kill me. Mm-hmm. Maybe you don't care. I think we have to realize that we are not just ourselves. We have a responsibility to a community, not just us. We are not just us. That's being awfully self-centered, and it's not reality. There are many other things that we do together, like traffic lights, for example, safety things, toxins that we can put in the food, lead that could be in the water. We already obey those laws. We should do that with vaccination. It needs to be an edict, frankly, but I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, because that's political. And that's the reason I say get a serum insulin, get rid of your diabetes. Your chances of living, even if you're infected, go up. But please get vaccinated. So public health, let's face it, public health has been a failure. In our county alone, our public health director is half-time. He just quit, another person took over half-time. Did he lead a program of getting rid of diabetes? No. Did he have a program to avoid CBD oil and maybe to lead to marijuana addiction, or at least explain it to us? No. So public health has been a failure. Will public health ever be successful? I don't know. We probably need to fund it better, would be one way, but I think that maybe the best you can do is to gather the information like you are today, read some books, and you lead your family in good habits, and realize what causes viral infections, get a better way of eating, exercise more. Maybe that's the best you can do. I doubt that Bill Gates, as much as I love the foundation and Melinda and him, and they put the money where their mouth is, and I don't think they're going to solve this problem, because we're not attacking what causes virus to exist. They're all different forms. Some are from mosquitoes, and some we pick off from droplets. So we have to become very knowledgeable. It's something maybe needs to be taught in the schools big time, so that children are aware of how they can catch it, how they can prevent it, just like they can avoid diabetes and the complication as a child. We need to teach it to them maybe at least in high school and maybe before. So public health is a problem. And of course, fast food, where we take off the coverings of a lot of food, and the food is processed, and we're eating it. And if you're eating at a fast food restaurant every day, your body is slowly going to go like this, and you're going to be a diabetic. It's the way it is. So you must understand a little bit what proper nutrition is. And some other videos you get access to on YouTube, Facebook. You could gain some more information. But to read the books of Bill Gates, I think it's a wonderful thing. I think you learn a great deal from that. So we're just having a friendly thought here. Their foundation is the greatest. And you know, they made the money, and they decided to form this foundation, and they study the environment, and they study it across the world. No criticism. I personally think that if they had concentrated on the United States and get rid of our diabetes epidemic, they'd have saved maybe more lives. I don't know. That's all I have time for. Maybe I can afford. Maybe his bigger vision is better, and I hope he doesn't change it. But maybe he could add on to what I'm doing. Interesting to say, but politics are involved here. That's a big problem. And politics is different in every country. There are dictators and wars, and it's difficult. And but let's learn something from COVID. Let's study books, pandemics. Let's study history. Let's teach people to help protect themselves by proper nutrition, exercise, stress reduction, covering themselves. Let's encourage people to vaccinate. And it's tough to change people's minds, so we have to approach them in a loving manner. If you criticize them for not being vaccinated, they'll never change their mind. It's like politics. The head is wrapped in this, and they don't understand discussion, openness, truth. And but we need to keep on working on developing new vaccines. There actually is some hope, and that's in some of these books I recommended to you, that we could develop a vaccine that could be used internationally against the influenza coronaviruses, and at least kill off that one when other ones will reoccur. The polio, some people had the ambition to get rid of polio, and they essentially have. So it can be done, and so to have a vision like this is okay, and we could practice the things that we've learned, to make sure they reproduce, that we don't forget something occurred 30 years ago, and even our government agencies who get government money, they are funded, they can even remember what occurred those years ago, and update us on those things, and he could have told us to step up to bat sooner than we did. We were constantly a month behind, Dr. Birx says, to the Italians, because we did not maybe believe or look at history to see what was going to happen. Many people died because of that. But today, we have as Bill Gates in one of the last chapters in his book carefully explains, that technology can put us a little bit ahead this time. Matter of fact, he wrote a book, the first book he wrote, he was predicting what the future would be in technology, and he hit it nail on the head about 80% of the time. Who could be 100%? But what about the future? I think we've done more since the virus, done more video conferencing, more online grocery shopping. We go to school online, some of us. We can have virtual birthdays, virtual weddings, virtual churches with smartphones, which only 35% of people have, and now 80%. So we are advancing, and we can communicate across the world with information. We've had 3 plagues, pandemics, since about 541 to 1950. The AIDS epidemic, for example, we finally discovered what was doing it. The virus was doing it around 1980 or so. And we've eliminated essentially smallpox. We have vaccinations now. Don't forget, make sure the kids get vaccinated. And Napoleon got involved with yellow fever and his army. And in Paris, the medicine advanced, and we were beginning to realize about viruses, and also learned about war and diseases, like the Spanish flu, which hit the American soldiers in Texas, almost devastated them before they went to Europe, and then they carried the germ to Europe. Cholera, TB, malaria, polio, HIV. These are all progression of these viruses and bacteria over these years. An interesting thing was too, I want to mention this, Edward Koop, K-O-O-P, he, a number of years ago, was a Surgeon General. I will admit, even at that time, I really liked him. And when you read back in history, there was a real Surgeon General. He was concerned about the AIDS epidemic, and he wanted people to understand it. And he sent an informational letter to every family in the United States. Wow. That's passing out information. And when this flu thing came along, maybe that should have been done too, but even now, I think now we could send a letter to every person in the United States explaining pandemics and to watch out for the next one. Explain to them that type 2 diabetes and its diseases, you can prevent them, stop them, reversing the majority of the time in about a month. The people need to know that. I really speak to people who know about that. You can get rid of diabetes, and number 2 is the virus is a sugar feeder. I speak to doctors who don't know that, but they don't even know what the Warburg effect is. So you do now. I explained it to you. So I encourage you to look at these books. It'll help you avoid viruses, bacteria in the future. You can look at my other videos, YouTube, Facebook. I see people for free on Fridays at the Divine Cafe by the Coliseum. I'll be there at 11:30 on Friday. I see them for free to teach them on how to deal with cancer they've gotten, kidney disease they've gotten, how to change their way of eating, and I get into the keto a little bit and fasting. So thanks for listening to this little bit complex lecture. We'll speak about the viruses some more in the future, but I think you've learned quite a bit today. I hope I'll help you prevent problems in the future, and I do this because I care about you, I love you, and I am a doctor, and that's my job. Thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye.